It all started during a family trip when my husband's parents decided I should sit at a separate table. Yep, just like that. Not a single word was said to me the entire time. When I brought it up to my husband, he just gave this lazy shrug and mumbled, "That's just how they are." I smiled back and said, "Perfect. I've got my own way too." They didn't know it then, but they were about to find out exactly what that meant. And when they did the next morning, you could practically smell the panic. Thinking back, the warning signs had been there all along. The little digs. The passive-aggressive glances. That constant feeling like I was just a background character in my own relationship. But I chose to ignore it, because I loved Philip. I figured if I just kept showing up, being kind, being patient, things would shift. They didn't. Instead, I ended up on what was supposed to be a fun, easygoing family vacation to Flying Flags Avila Beach, California. But it turned into something completely different, something I'd remember forever. When we got to the resort, I'll admit it, my hopes were high. The place looked like it had been pulled straight out of a glossy travel magazine. Soft white sand, tall palm trees swaying in the breeze, and the sound of the ocean just close enough to hear. I thought maybe this would be the moment things changed. Maybe Gerald and Margot, my in-laws, would finally let their guard down. Maybe we'd share meals, have some laughs, and I'd finally feel like part of the family. But I couldn't have been more wrong. That first night, we went to this really nice restaurant for dinner. The host led us to a long table, beautifully set for our whole group. Just as I was about to sit down next to Philip, Gerald cleared his throat and said, "Oh, there must be some kind of mistake. She'll need her own table." I froze. For a second, I thought maybe I'd misheard. "Sorry, what?" I asked. Margot didn't even glance up from the menu. "It's just how we do things." I turned to Philip, waiting for him to say something, anything. To stand up for me. To remind them I was his wife, not some outsider tagging along. But all he did was sigh and shrug. "It's just their way," he mumbled. Their way. So I sat alone. At my own table. In a public restaurant. Looking back, I probably should have gotten up and left right then. But I didn't. I stayed. I told myself maybe it was just a weird family tradition or a one-time deal. But it wasn't. The next morning, I got up early, excited to head down for breakfast with everyone. I assumed they'd be waiting for me in the hotel restaurant. They weren't. I texted Philip. No reply. I wandered around for nearly 30 minutes before I finally stumbled upon them, already halfway through their meal, laughing and chatting like nothing was wrong. Like I didn't even exist. I walked up, trying to keep it together. "Why didn't you let me know you were coming down?" I asked. Gerald barely looked up. "We figured you'd catch on." Margot took a sip of her coffee and said, like a mantra, "It's just how we do things." I glanced at Philip. He was eating, completely unfazed, as if this was totally normal. And that's when it really hit me. I wasn't part of their family. I never had been. And Philip? He wasn't on my team. The rest of the trip followed that same cruel pattern. Every single meal, I sat by myself. Every group activity? They conveniently forgot to mention it. They took a private boat tour. I only found out when I saw their smiling faces in a photo on Instagram. They went to a high-end wine tasting. I discovered that one when I saw them dressed to the nines, walking through the lobby. Later, I confronted Philip. "You could have sent me a text," I said, trying to keep my cool. Another sigh. Another shrug. "It's just their way." That was all I ever got from him. By day 4, I stopped asking. I stopped trying. If they wanted me to be invisible, fine. But they had no clue what was coming. Because I've got my own way too. That night, while they were off drinking and toasting to their perfect little getaway, I went back to the hotel room and rolled up my sleeves. I wasn't just sitting apart anymore. I was about to disappear from their lives completely, and leave a dent while I was at it. I opened my laptop, pulled up the reservation emails, and got to work. See, what they didn't realize was that I had booked everything. The hotel? Under my name. The rental car? On my credit card. The dinner reservations? Made through my account. Even the spa day Margot had been looking forward to for weeks. Yeah, I booked that too. One by one, I started canceling. Their rooms? Gone. The car? Cancelled. Their fancy dinner by the water? Nope. The spa? Called them up myself and let them know Margot wouldn't be needing that appointment after all. And then I packed my things, took the rental car, and hit the road. While they were raising their glasses and pretending everything was picture perfect, I was already cruising toward Charleston. I checked into a luxury suite, ordered up some room service, and sat out on the balcony watching the ocean, finally breathing. Meanwhile, back in Hilton Head? The chaos was about to start. I woke up the next morning in Charleston feeling more refreshed than I had in days. The salty breeze was floating through my room as I sipped my coffee, stretched out on the lounge chair, and watched the waves roll in. Then my phone started buzzing. Philip. I let it ring. Then Margot. Then Philip again. Then Gerald. I switched it to silent and leaned back with a smile. They'd finally realized. I pictured it all so clearly. Gerald, groggy, shuffling to the door only to be greeted by a hotel manager saying, "Sir, there seems to be a problem with your reservation." Margot, stretching in bed, grabbing her phone to check the day's plans, only to see a flood of cancellation emails. Philip, rubbing his temples, still half asleep, listening to his mom spiral from confused to full-on meltdown. No rooms. No car. No dinner. No spa. I smiled into my coffee. And a few hours later, once I'd had my fill of peace and quiet, I finally checked my messages. Philip, where are you? Philip, what the hell's going on? Philip, you need to fix this. Now. His calls started coming in rapid fire. I let the first few go straight to voicemail, just to enjoy the silence. But then, I picked up the next one. Honestly? I was curious. The second I answered, Philip's voice hit me like a freight train. Where are you? He demanded. Charleston, I said calmly. He paused. Charleston? What the hell are you doing there? Just enjoying my vacation. There was a beat of silence on his end. In the background, I could hear the chaos unfolding, Margot yelling at the hotel staff, Gerald cursing like a sailor. You canceled everything? He finally asked, like he still couldn't wrap his head around it. Yes. He sucked in a sharp breath. Do you have any idea what you've done? My parents don't have a place to stay. We had plans. You left us. Oh no, I cut in, my voice laced with fake sympathy. That sounds so uncomfortable. He didn't say a word, probably realizing I had flipped his own line right back at him. I kept going. You all wanted me to be apart from you. Well, now you got what you asked for. This is insane, he snapped. You need to come back. I let out a short laugh. No, Philip. I really don't. And I hung up. Later, I found out just how much the trip had unraveled after I left. Turns out, the hotel was completely booked up, and they had to scramble for a backup. The best they could find was some sketchy roadside motel 20 minutes away, flickering lights, damp carpet, and that weird smell that sticks to your clothes. No rental car meant they had to rely on Uber, but Hilton Head isn't exactly swarming with drivers. They got hit with surge pricing every time. As for that waterfront dinner Gerald had been bragging about? Fully booked. They ended up at some overcrowded tourist trap, surrounded by screaming kids and soggy seafood. And Margot? She threw a fit at the spa when she found out her reservation had been cancelled. Full-on meltdown. She demanded they squeeze her in. They didn't. I know all of this because Philip wouldn't stop texting me. You seriously just left us like this? Mom's furious. She was humiliated at the spa. Dad's losing it over dinner. I hope you're happy. And honestly? I was. At first, I figured that was the worst of it, a little discomfort, some well-deserved chaos. Just enough to give them a taste of what they'd put me through. But then, something unexpected happened. A new message buzzed through. This time, it wasn't Philip. It was Natalie, Philip's cousin. Natalie, hey, just wanted to say. I heard what happened. And honestly? Good for you. I blinked. Reread it. Natalie and I had always been cool with each other, but we weren't exactly close. Still, something in her message made my stomach twist. Wait, what do you mean? Her next reply hit me like a punch to the chest. Natalie, they did the same thing to Philip's ex-wife. I sat up straight. Philip's ex-wife? He'd told me his first marriage ended because they'd grown apart, just the usual story. Nothing dramatic. I had no reason to doubt it. Until now. What do you mean? Natalie, she went on a family trip with them. They treated her like garbage. Made her sit alone, ignored her, acted like she wasn't even there. She left halfway through. Filed for divorce a month later. My heart was racing. Natalie, I didn't say anything because I assumed you knew. But after seeing what they did to you, I realized he never told you, did he? No. He hadn't. Because if he had, I never would have gone on that damn trip. I would have known this wasn't just how they are. It was a pattern. And Philip? He knew exactly what was coming, and he let it happen anyway. That night, he called again. And this time, I answered. I need you to fix this, he said immediately, his voice tight, on edge. No, see, I said, you don't understand. My parents, he started. But I cut him off. I understand perfectly. This wasn't about some weird tradition. This was about control. And you? You knew they'd treat me like this. And you stood by and let it happen. There was a long pause. Who told you that? He asked, like it slipped out before he could stop himself. Bingo. I laughed. So it's true. I wasn't the first. He didn't answer. Finally, he muttered, look, my parents can be a little difficult. But they mean well. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. Philip, they don't even see me as part of the family. There was this tiny hesitation on his end. That half-second of silence where the truth seeps in. And I knew. He wasn't going to stand up for me. He never had. Come back, he said instead. Let's fix this. I looked out at the ocean, the waves rolling in under the moonlight. No, I said, calm and clear. I think I've already fixed it. And I hung up. Afterward, I just sat there staring at my phone. Everything in me buzzing with realization. He had known. He had seen this all happen before. And he still walked me straight into it. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was done. I poured myself another drink, kicked back in my lounge chair, and tried to focus on the sound of the ocean. But something was eating at me. If he had lied about his ex-wife, what else had he kept from me? I opened up Facebook and typed in her name, Vanessa. I'd never even thought to look her up before. But now? I needed to know. Her profile was private. But I scrolled through our mutual friends and found her sister, Jenna. And Jenna's posts were public. One caught my eye, dated 2 years ago, right after the divorce. Never let a man's family destroy you. Never let them convince you that you're less than you are. My sister deserved better. We all tried to warn her. Never again. My stomach sank. I kept scrolling and found a comment from Natalie, the same Natalie who messaged me. I wish she had listened to us. At least she's free now. Listen to them? I sat there frozen, heart pounding. My fingers hovered over my phone. I could message Jenna. I could ask her what really happened. But was I really ready to hear the truth? I sat there, just staring at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keys for what felt like forever. Then finally, I exhaled, swallowed the lump in my throat, and typed. Hey, this is going to sound kind of random, but I think we need to talk. Her reply came almost instantly. Jenna, I was wondering when you'd reach out. That single line hit me like a gut punch. So, you know who I am? Jenna, yeah. We've been waiting for this to happen. We? I froze. What do you mean we? Jenna, Vanessa wasn't the first. And she definitely wasn't the last. My breath caught mid-inhale. What are you saying? Jenna, I'm saying Philip's done this before. More than once. His parents too. Same story, different woman. Jenna, and if you're messaging me now, I'm guessing you just went through the same thing. I felt physically ill. This wasn't some bizarre family quirk. This wasn't a one-off incident. This was a routine. A twisted little initiation rite they ran on every woman Philip ever brought home. To them, none of us were real. Not people. Just hurdles to wear down until we broke or left. And Philip? He let it happen. Every damn time. Why didn't anyone say anything? Jenna, we tried. But Philip's got this way of isolating whoever he's dating. He tells them his family's just quirky, makes sure they don't ask too many questions. Jenna, let me guess, he said Vanessa was the problem? That she overreacted, made drama out of nothing? I closed my eyes. He had said exactly that. Said she never understood his family. That she'd blown things out of proportion. But now I saw it for what it was. Vanessa hadn't been dramatic, she'd been outnumbered. And stuck. Just like I had been. At least, until now. I didn't sleep that night. My thoughts wouldn't stop racing. I kept turning it all over in my head, every red flag, every ignored instinct, every time I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I felt like I'd wasted years of my life on someone who was never on my side. But there was something else, too, something that didn't sit right. Why had Philip been this desperate to get me back? Why all the calls? Why now? At exactly 6 a.m., I got my answer. A text popped up from an unknown number. Unknown, ma'am, this is Officer Graves with the Hilton Head Police Department. We need to speak with you regarding a missing persons report filed by your husband. I shot upright so fast, I almost knocked my phone off the nightstand. Missing person? I scrambled to call the number. The second the officer answered, I blurted out, I'm fine. I'm not missing. There was a pause. Ma'am, he said calmly, are you saying you left voluntarily? Yes. Of course I did. My husband knows exactly where I am. He's been calling me nonstop. The officer let out a quiet sigh. Well, he reported that you left without explanation and haven't responded to calls. He expressed concern for your safety. I clenched my jaw so tight, I thought my molars might crack. This wasn't concern. This was control, his last-ditch attempt to drag me back. Not because he cared. Because I had slipped out of his grip. I took a deep breath and steadied my voice. Officer, I'm fine. I'm in Charleston. I left Hilton Head on my own. I am not missing, and I do not want my husband contacting me again. There was another pause. Then, would you like to file a formal request for no further contact? I didn't answer right away. I just stared out the window for a long second. Then, finally, I let the breath go. Yes. I would. And just like that, I put the first legal nail in the coffin of my marriage. Not even an hour later, my phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Margot. Margot, I cannot believe you would humiliate us like this. I laughed out loud. Ignored it. Then came another. Margot, you made Philip involve the police? Do you even realize how this makes us look? I made Philip involve the police? I rolled my eyes and took a long sip of my coffee. And then came the flood. Margot, this family has done nothing but try to welcome you. Margot, you're being incredibly selfish. Margot, you need to come back and fix this. And finally, Margot, if you don't come back, Philip is going to make things very difficult for you. I froze. That wasn't passive-aggressive. That wasn't guilt-tripping. That was a threat. I stared at the message, rereading it over and over. Something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about being excluded or mistreated. This was a coordinated effort to break me. And if I didn't stand up now, really stand up, they might succeed. I looked at Margot's message one last time. If you don't come back, Philip is going to make things very difficult for you. That wasn't a warning. That was a promise. And I was done playing nice. I cracked my knuckles, took a breath, and typed out one reply. Me, perfect. Let's make things difficult, then. Then I did something they never saw coming. I booked a conference room at a hotel in Charleston and sent out invitations to every single one of them, Philip, his parents, and Natalie. If they wanted a war, fine. But I wasn't going to fight it on their turf. This time, they'd have to face me. The next morning, I sat at the long wooden table in the quiet conference room, a few bottles of water lined up, the silence thick and heavy. I didn't have to wait long. The door slammed open. Philip came in first, his jaw so tight I thought his teeth might snap. His eyes locked on mine, full of tension and fury. Margot marched in behind him, her heels clicking like gunshots across the tile. Gerald followed, already red-faced and muttering curses under his breath. And finally, Natalie. She slipped in quietly, arms folded, her face unreadable. But when she caught my eye, she gave me a small nod. I didn't know if she was there to witness, to support, or just to watch the whole thing burn. Either way, she came. I leaned back in my chair, calm, collected. Glad you could all make it, I said. Philip's voice cut the air like a knife. What the hell is this? Philip's voice cut through the room like a blade. I didn't flinch. I just smiled, slow and steady. It's a conversation, I said. You've all been dying to talk, right? So, let's talk. Gerald folded his arms across his chest and scoffed. You think this is funny? No, I replied, keeping my voice calm, even. I think it's sad. Pathetic, really. The little games this family plays with the women who marry in, and how you all thought you could get away with it again. But you picked the wrong woman this time. Margot narrowed her eyes at me. You abandoned us. I actually laughed, couldn't help it. Oh, I abandoned you? I said, shaking my head. That's rich coming from the same people who spent an entire vacation pretending I didn't exist. Philip let out a sharp breath and gripped the back of a chair like he needed it to stay upright. You're blowing this way out of proportion. And there it was. The moment it all snapped. I slammed my palms against the table. Hard. Margot flinched. I am your wife, I said, my voice cutting through the air. Not a stranger. Not some outsider you just happened to bring along. I'm your wife, and you let them treat me like I was nothing. Then I pointed directly at Philip. And you knew. You knew this wasn't new. You knew what your parents were doing. And you let it happen. Again. His face drained of color. Margot jumped in, her voice sharp and defensive. We were just honoring tradition. Bullshit, I snapped. That wasn't tradition. That was control. That was a power play. A test, and one you've failed with every woman that's ever tried to be part of this family. You're overreacting, Philip started. But I was already pulling my phone out. I opened the messages from Jenna, scrolled to the thread, and slid the phone across the table. Read it. He hesitated. Read it. Philip picked up the phone slowly, eyes flicking over the screen. I watched his jaw tighten with every message. When he finished, he tossed the phone back onto the table like it burned his hand. This doesn't prove anything. Gerald crossed his arms, voice low and dismissive. You're digging up the past. This has nothing to do with us. I turned to Margot. Is that right? I asked. Because last night, you sent me a message that was pretty clear. You said if I didn't come back, Philip would make things very difficult. Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. From the end of the table, Natalie let out a low whistle. Wow. Philip turned to his mother, his voice sharp. You did what? Margot stiffened in her seat. I was just trying to help her see reason. Reason? Philip's voice rose. You've been pulling this crap for years. You did it to Vanessa. You're doing it again. Gerald shifted in his seat. Margot gave him a warning look, but the damage was done. Philip's jaw clenched hard. Jesus Christ. And that's when I saw it. The crack. That tiny fracture in Philip's blind loyalty to his parents. The moment he realized I hadn't been overreacting. That I'd never been wrong. He turned back to me. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Like maybe, just maybe, he was seeing things clearly. I waited. Gave him space to say something that mattered. But instead? He ran his hands through his hair and muttered, I can fix this. My stomach sank. That was his takeaway? Not an apology. Not a single ounce of remorse. Just a knee-jerk need to fix the optics. I let out a long breath and stood up, grabbing my bag. You really don't get it, I said quietly. He stared at me in silence. I'm not coming back, Philip. That snapped him out of it. Wait, what? You're serious? I nodded. Natalie rolled her eyes and muttered, Dude. How have you not figured that out by now? Margot shot up in her chair. This is ridiculous. You're throwing away your marriage over a misunderstanding. I looked her straight in the eyes. Calm. Unshaken. No, Margot. You threw it away. You, Gerald, your little twisted games. Philip? He just didn't have the backbone to stop it. Philip reached toward me. Please, just wait, let's talk this through. I stepped back and held up a hand. No, Philip. You talk. You spin. You let them walk all over me. But me? I'm done listening. I grabbed my phone and turned to leave. Philip's voice followed me, desperate now. Where are you going? I paused at the door. Looked over my shoulder one last time. I'm leaving. Margot snorted. You can't just leave a marriage. I met her stare. Flat. Unreadable. Watch me. And then I walked out. Underscore 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 underscore. It took 6 months to finalize the divorce. Philip tried everything, begging, guilt-tripping, even throwing out the old "you're overreacting" card. But I never looked back. Not once. Natalie kept in touch. Told me everything imploded after I left. Philip finally confronted his parents. And let's just say it wasn't a sweet little heart-to-heart. Gerald called him weak. Margot broke down crying, claiming I had poisoned him. But it was too late. Philip finally saw them for what they were. It didn't matter to me, though. I was already gone. I moved back to Charleston for good. Found a new apartment. Reconnected with old friends. Started rebuilding, slow, but solid. And then, one night, months later, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. Philip, I see it now. I'm sorry. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. Because for the first time in years, I was free.